Hey everyone, welcome to the Feel Good Conversation Show. Today I have a returning guest. Many of you will already have seen him before on the 3 or 4 shows that we've done together. It's Robert Jardine I'm going to bring in. He's just waiting backstage, bless him. He's all wrapped up because I'm in Portugal and he's in Scotland. I will reveal that I have just had the heater on myself. So we are coming into this time of year. A little bit about Robert. Robert came to my attention when I saw him on another show, and I loved what he had to say. And I immediately bought a book about what he was talking about because it really resonated. And when I got this book, all of a sudden, the health issues I'd been experiencing made complete sense to me. And so we kind of reached out via a mutual friend. And then we had a conversation and he agreed to come on the show. And since then, we've we've wanted to kind of share the message. But Robert, I think, has, in fact, let me just bring him on because it's much better to hear his own story than my interpretation of it. Robert, welcome back.
Hi, hello.
I was just going to give my version of how you got into health and healing and how it all came about, because you were involved in a very serious car accident, weren't you?
Yeah. I woke up one day and was told that I'd been asleep for over 2 weeks. So and I found it. I tried to get out of bed, but I couldn't because I was under traction. So but that was quite some time ago, and that really started the first year and a half was just recovery. Just trying to get myself back to normal, as close as you can. And then eventually life events happened, and I then started to have a big interest in health, obviously. And then that just led me on, and it seemed to resonate with me. The more I knew, the more interesting it got. And I eventually, over a long time, discovered Dr. Hammer's work. And all of a sudden, all of these therapies now, they all kind of fell into place. And I could see how they could help, but I could see how they missed the bigger picture. And knowing what I know now sort of allows everything to fall into place and makes my work so much more effective, I think.
Yeah, excellent. I just wanted to I just wanted to make sure that everyone can hear me because I realized that my sound wasn't working right at the start. So I was just like talking with no sound at the start. But I'm guessing we've got somebody listening in right now, Jack Polly. He's saying, hi, Louisa and Robert. Watched Robert on a previous show and loved it. Well, welcome back. Can you hear me? Can you just let me know if you can hear me? I would really, really appreciate that. And thank you for joining us. So I can't imagine what that must be like to wake up finding out that you've lost two weeks of your life. That must be incredible. But I can imagine, when it puts you on a healing path, it changes your life. And so you've Jack is confirming that he can hear me. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So through the work that you've been doing and through our interviews or chats and our videos that we've been doing, I've got very familiar and very appreciative of Dr. Hammer's work. But I just wanted to, as we get off to a start, just to cover a couple of things, because there are lots of people out there that have the story that he's a bit of a charlatan or that he's been discredited and this, that, and the other. And I just wanted to clear up that neither of us are doing this as direct medical advice. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. This is just for people's knowledge. It's information. It's objectively proven information. It's certainly not been accepted by the medical industry. But then that's a whole different issue. I mean, I'd make, I don't really make much from this at all. It's just, I know the power of this work is so important to know, to appreciate, but everyone has to be responsible for their own decisions. And believe it or not, we all are responsible for it. Even if we just agree with the doctor, legally, you are agreeing. So it's your decision to agree to whatever's said by any health professional. So that's a sort of a thing that I would like to say is just that, please do listen to us, but it's for information purposes only. And it's just to broaden your understanding, to give a new perspective and potentially new options for you if you consider it suitable for yourself.
Yes, absolutely. So we do recommend that everybody does their own research and also come to their own conclusion. We're not taking responsibility for anything here, because neither of us are doctors, are we? Although you are somebody who has studied very extensively. So for those people that are a bit concerned that we might be like peddling some kind of idea of something that's discredited, this is literally just to broaden a perspective, to give you a new framework from which you might consider your health from. And I found it actually very, very useful to know that the model of health that you've been talking to me with and about and sharing it's almost like a user manual for being a human being, isn't it?
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, it's perfectly, that could not be put better. It's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Yeah, like an owner's manual, like when you get a new car and you want to know how things all fit together and how it works. And the thing that really I like about it is the fact that it brings you back into the rest of the world at some level, because you're talking about mammalian responses, behaviors. It links you into all of life. And one of the things that I've always found with the common medical model is that humans are almost seen as people who we're seen as people with faulty immune systems. Like we're almost seen as things that aren't very vibrationally strong. We break too easily. We need this, we need that, or else we can't be. It's almost like we're being prescribed to all the time. And I love that this puts the onus completely back on the individual. So thank you. What I wanted to say really was this is your session to use and to help people learn more about how they can self-heal. So how do you want to start this today? We've got a few more people watching in. We've got Jeannie, who's also joining us in the chat room, saying hello. Yes, I have sound as well. Thank you so much for letting me know that. I really appreciate that. I just want to put it out there that Robert's going to be teaching us a little bit here, but if you have questions, are you happy to take questions as you go along, Robert? Or would you prefer those more at the end? What would be most useful?
I don't know. Just whatever feels good. I mean, if you get a question, and if you're able to see the question first, Louise, if you think that it's a question that needs to be heard, then for sure ask me. If not, we can do it at the end. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So any question that is useful will definitely get listened. Will definitely get aired. If it's a slightly one that I think might be better offline, then are you happy to answer a couple offline as well, Robert?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. And I should also thank you. We have had a few emails, or I've had a few emails from people who have, thanked you and thanked us for the information, and that it's been the missing key, and it's really been sort of integral to them and their healing process. So where would you like to start?
Oh, heavens. Well, I think I'll just start by telling the story of how I got into it, so that people then will see why I'm so enthusiastic about it. And obviously, if people have listened to me before, they will have heard this story too, but there might be some new people. So I'm just going to say it anyway, okay? In 2007, I think it was, I was in Auckland, New Zealand, and I was studying a health modality there, and it was kinesiology I was studying, and on that course I spoke with another student who and I asked a question. I said, look, my sister has a very aggressive, very debilitating rheumatoid arthritis, which is a condition all full of inflammation, and her joints were deforming, and her life was in misery. She was in pain all the time. So this guy said to me, you want to check the work of this Dr. Hammer out. There's very little that's been translated into English because he's German. But there's some articles you can get. So I did that. I came home from Auckland and I got what was available back in 2007. And I thought it resonated with me. I thought, there's no belief involved here. This guy's just stating facts, which he has objectively proven to me he's objectively proven to the point where I believed his proof, right? So I went forward with that. And I remember the day I had a conversation with my sister at the time. And at that time, we just were walking up a river, which is quite close to where I live. And just going purely by what Dr. Hammer, what I'd learned from his article, I asked questions and I uncovered a part of my sister's history, which I did not know about. And it allowed her to offload a major emotional trauma which she had been carrying about. And there was a lot of emotions came out with this. She was quite emotional about this and able to talk to someone about it. Anyway, at that time, she was on very serious medication, namely she was on methotrexate, which is, I'm not a chemist, so I'm not terribly sure exactly what it is, but it's a very potentially toxic drug. But the doctors had her on this to try and modulate her inflammation in her body, because they were doing blood tests on her, and every month she was a blood test, and it was always really high inflammatory markers they were getting in. So they had her on this methotrexate. I took her up the river. We had this conversation. We uncovered a deeply felt, highly isolating emotional trauma that she had suffered in herself. She had absorbed that trauma into herself. And this had happened some 16 years earlier at that time. Now, what happened was that day, my sister actually decided to stop taking her medication for some reason. Nothing to do with me. She never told me about that. But anyway, she trots up to the doctors about 3 weeks later for her next blood test. She takes the blood test and she goes home. The doctor phones her up and says, look, we want you back in to take that test again because the test's not right. You need to come back in. So she did. She went back in, did the blood test again. And then the next day, the doctor phoned her up and says, the second blood test confirmed the first one. Your inflammation levels are completely back to normal. There's no inflammation markers in your body at all. You must, the doctor said, you must, the doctor said, how are you feeling? And Janet said to her, well, I'm feeling great. I feel absolutely amazing. So the doctor said, well, you must keep taking the medication just as it is. And it's obviously doing you good. I've never seen it work so well. So that was it. Janet put the phone down. But what Janet didn't tell her was that she never took the medication after that conversation we had. And she never took it again after that. So that to me was like one conversation caused a whole reaction in my sister's biology, and her rheumatoid arthritis, which apparently she had inherited, right? And all these things that they tell us, okay, it just disappeared and it didn't come back. So that to me was like, it was so obvious to me because I was there. I saw the process, and then I spoke with my sister many, many times after that. And, that was my introduction to it. So right from the get-go, I knew, at least for that, my experience of it was completely correct. And the healing it created in Janet was dramatic. It went from being crippled to being well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously her joints were deformed. Okay. So she had, that never healed because that's just because she had taken 6 years to actually get this off her chest, right? The 16 years had caused a lot of damage in her body. But as soon as it was gone, so went the rheumatoid arthritis. So that's my introduction to it. Okay. So starting from that sort of point, and actually from then, as a therapist and as a therapist that mingles with many other therapists who know this stuff, I know about literally, many, we'll call them healings, that have happened through this work. And it's been life-changing for everyone that's been involved with it, really. So if I sound enthusiastic or even evangelical, it's probably because I am, because I've seen it. I've seen the light, and I've seen the truth in this light. And since then, I've been trying to spread that truth. So that's why I'm with you, Louisa. Yeah.
And that's why I want to help as well, because my own experience of persistent cystitis, which I've had over the years, and just kind of figured that was just how it was. It's disappeared since I first got the book that you were referring to back in the first show that I saw you on. And since then, I've had an app on my phone. I think it's the website LearningNM or GNM.com.
Yeah.
Because it's a fantastic database. And so anytime I'm noticing changes in my children or like just wanting to check something out, I'm looking in the databases and kind of making the connections. I mean, I'm sure, like a lot of healers and people who are interested in natural health and healing, there's that, like a lot of us already were kind of on the path, in as much as, we may well have listened to Hay House type things and noticed that our emotions can create symptoms and whatnot. And I myself had also been diagnosed with ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, in my late teens, and told I would have it for life and stuff. So that's what put me on the path of wanting to feel well for myself.
Yeah.
This is really incredible stuff. We've got a question from David Dawson, who has joined us before, and he said, how did you uncover the event that caused your sister's rheumatoid arthritis, and what was the technique that helped her through the trauma? Is that like a special technique you did with her to get her through the trauma?
No, it's much easier. Health is sitting right in front of us, and we can't see it, right? We're bamboozled with diagnoses and with hypotheses that come from, through from the medical industry, right? And we just think like health's, when it's, it's a difficult thing to have, but it's not. The solution is right in front of us. Okay. Our bodies are reacting to life very specifically. And Dr. Hammer has proven that to the nth degree, to the most minutest detail, with objective proof. Now, that question is great. How did I, how do we uncover the trauma? And well,
what was the technique?
The trauma is always precedes the symptom, because the symptom is the body reacting to the trauma, right? And so with something as big as rheumatoid arthritis, especially what you'd call, rheumatoid arthritis that was affecting the whole body. It's not just like some like finger joint or something, but my sister had it in her legs, her knees, her shoulders, her hands, her wrists. Okay. She was really suffering. Well, that was a big trauma. Okay. And that trauma is still active because the rheumatoid arthritis is still active. So we just track back in time, chalking, gently going back to when it was started, what was going on in life then, what was going on in life just before it started, what was going on then, was there something that really touched you, that really shocked you, that, even if you think about it now, it will have a big emotional effect. I mean, and literally it took not much more than that, okay, for Janet to start focusing her mind around that time in her life and the issues that was going on then, until she suddenly kind of went quiet and then started to cry and then started to just, it just all came out. It was just like a flood of all the emotions she felt because of something that happened. And I'm not going to obviously discuss that because that's entirely her business, okay, and very much so. But the thing was, it came to her awareness when she had permission to go there, when she had reason to go there, and she was allowed to go there in a safe place, free of judgment, free, just a place that was a place of safety, so that a deeply felt, very self-isolating issue could be talked about with somebody in confidence. And that's all it took. There was no more to it than that. And then there was such a massive emotional release, and to be able to even just to share that with somebody who just was there to support her. And I did give new perspectives to her, but well, no, that's not true. I helped her find new perspectives, because that is one of the keys to healing. It's, what the work Dr. Hammer discovers, I suppose if I was to try and sum it up, it's like this. When we can make or facilitate our conscious mind having a complete awareness of the cause of the condition, whatever it is, right? And when the conscious mind understands it in the emotional context with which the trauma happened, because you can think of a trauma just consciously and not connect with it, or you can think of it from inside the trauma where you're feeling that emotion again, okay? Well, when that happens, and the conscious mind now is connected to the trauma, which is lost in history, but it's all of a sudden connected now in real time, the conscious mind somehow it takes the energy out of that trauma, and the brain reorganizes itself, and the symptoms then start to go into healing, and the thing then finally heals and comes to resolution. And that's the key to, I would say, as a very experienced therapist, I would say that is the key to all healing. It's connecting, to understanding and connecting on that emotional level to the actual cause of the trauma, not past lives, or not something that happened in childhood, even though my IBS only started 2 years ago, right? It's you've got to get to the what you call the biologically active trauma, that the body is still harboring, the brain is still harboring and reacting to. And when you connect to that biologically active trauma, and you become aware of the context and the emotional qualities of it, it's like bursting a spot. Do you know? It just comes out, and the body can suddenly be free of the poison. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? It's like being a poultice, and just poof, out it comes when you get it. I mean, if you don't get it, it's very, very frustrating, because you try week on week on week to try and find the trauma. The person's not connecting with it because there may be emotional blocks up. They might just not remember. It might be too far in the past, and that's when it doesn't work, when you can't find that. But every time that the person is able to make contact with the shock and realize it within the context of that shock, but also realize it within the greater context of the therapeutic work, as in you now realize that shock has been causing your symptom for the last 10 years, right? It just makes this most beautiful healing to happen. And you don't need to be able to speak to spirits, or you don't need to be psychedelic, or you don't need to be terribly well educated to do this. It's like a interpersonal healing. It's a healing of hearts. That's what it is. It's a healing of hearts.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And it takes support, warmth, knowing it's okay. It takes the complete removal of any judgment, because we're touching very, very sort of sensitive places that are so sensitive that the body has now created some so-called disease because of it. And I mean, the best way to look at a symptom is it's a message from the body. That's all it is. It's just that's your body telling you that something needs fixed.
Yeah.
And Dr. Hammer basically has just proven that beyond any shadow of a doubt, no matter what anybody says about his character, because no one knew him, right? You know, he was a nice guy. I had 4 telephone conversations with him, and I found him to be a very nice guy. Okay, but a very strong-willed man. But then think of what he had to put up with in his life. It's amazing he managed to last till he was 84, because it would have killed me in 10 minutes. You know, I mean, the pressure he was under. But he soldiered on anyway round. The healing. So, oh no, sorry, I've gone on. I'm sorry, I've gone off on one. I do, you know, I'm just so enthusiastic. You know, it's me. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I was just wanting to kind of round up what you'd already said already, just to make sure that I've understood it correctly.
Yeah.
And so that if other people have made the same, you know, just to kind of summarize it and just check understanding for not just me but for everyone, because we've got a few people commenting in the chat room as well, and a few questions coming through for sure. So my understanding is that people have the symptom, and that is essentially the body talking to you. It's having a conversation. It's letting you know that something's not quite right. And then the first step, I guess, in the self-healing is you're tracing it back. Like, when did it start? You might be asking yourself the questions: when did it start? What was happening immediately before? Or, you know, maybe what's the longest time period before that it might take the symptoms to start? A few weeks? Or
well, that's a little bit. That's what I would say would be the next. So there's somebody crawling
on
the. Somebody's trying to keep out of the camera. They're crawling.
Oh, bless them.
Oh my God. It's a crazy world.
Oh no,
right.
It's cool.
So what's the time? Well, that's not
we can
so
cover that later.
because
okay.
Right, because but the explanation of why it's not straightforward is easy. It's like this: some symptoms happen to us when the emotional conflict is unresolved. It's like active and still unresolved, right? So that's when you get some symptoms such as adenocancers. So cancers of the adeno or adenoid type cancers, right? That's like lung cancer. That develops when the emotional conflict or the biological conflict is active, right? But symptoms like rheumatoid arthritis, the inflammatory type symptoms, they actually start when the conflict goes from active into healing.
Yeah.
And that's with my sister, that's what happens with somebody with rheumatoid arthritis, is the conflict goes active and then into healing. And it's the healing that causes the inflammation. But because the initial trauma is never resolved properly, it gets reactivated and into healing, and it can go on for a whole lifetime, and that's what causes those. So the question was, how long is it?
That's where I was as well, wasn't it? You know, with urine infection.
Exactly. Cystitis is a healing symptom. It's just that the body hasn't been able to finally get rid of that issue through knowledge. Right. Yeah. And that's what happened with you. When you read the book and it resonated and you just thought back in your mind, your unconscious mind just worked it out, says, all right, you know, there's no need for this. I now I get it. I know, I realize what must have caused it. Well, now I'm an much older woman. I can understand that better. That's no longer, I don't need to define my territory, which is what your cystitis is about. I now have a territory. I've got a lovely partner. I've got kids. I'm where I need to be. So my psyche, which is the brain function which controls symptoms, my psyche can just kind of go, okay, and it hands it over to the conscious mind, if you like, and just gives up. And that was the same with my sister. You know, her psyche for years, 16 years, had been busy trying to help her. And it was a self-devaluation conflict which causes rheumatoid arthritis. So her body was trying to make itself better for 16 years because she wasn't good enough. Because why? Because something happened 16 years ago which really upset her and questioned her own self as a mother and as a person, you know. But when that was released, the psyche released its need, and the body then just went through one final phase of inflammation, and within days, literally, it all fizzled out and it was gone.
Yeah. And I'm sure, if there was a doctor whose experience of rheumatoid arthritis is that it's something that just progressively gets worse and you have to have medication for, I'm imagining they'll be listening in and thinking, what a load of old bollocks. Because that's what they'll see. But I guess from your perspective, you've seen that it heals, and I've seen that cystitis heals. And we've had messages from people who have experienced the healing. It really makes sense.
Yeah, but what we must always, one thing we must always remember is somebody's opinion is just a reflection on their perspective. Yeah. That's all. It doesn't make it right or wrong. I say this about lots of issues going on in the world right now. It's not everyone's opinion. I say it because of what I know, right? A doctor, obviously, he'll have an opinion which might differ, but that's because of what they sort of know as well. It's just that with German medicine, you can prove it. If you want, you can go and get the scan and you can get it interpreted, right? But you don't need to, because that work's been done. Every disease that is known to man has been understood through the brain, photographed many times over, and now all you need to know is what your symptom actually is. So, and that sounds straightforward, but it's not, because sometimes you can say, oh, well, I've got somebody comes to me and says, well, I've got this and it's got this and this. Well, you actually need to know what actual tissue in the body is affected, because you can get a diagnosis from this person and a diagnosis from this person, and they might be totally different. And they might be completely wrong. I mean, they reckon about 60% of diagnosis is wrong. So again, so you've got to, as a therapist who is aware of German medicine and who, tries to use I take people on the whole, on the bigger picture. Yeah, you've got to factor that in, that sometimes a diagnosis might be wrong. So, but anyway, round, there may well be people thinking this is a lot of bunkum, but that's fine. That's good for them, and that'll see them through their life. I'm sure it suit them well. For you and me, we've sort of known it from the inside. When I've cured myself of things, and I've cured I haven't cured other people, but other people have cured themselves with a little bit of help. Yeah. Right? Because no one cures anybody else. You can help somebody cure themselves. The curing, the healing has to happen in the psyche of that person.
I love that. That just gives responsibility back to people, which is what we were talking a bit about on Carl's show this morning. So if I can just go back, because I really want to tie in these questions, because they're intelligent and I think they're really worth having a good go at. So you have your symptom, you trace back to the question of when did it start, what was happening before, and just try to get a grip with it. You're kind of connecting with the trauma. And you mentioned very specifically that another key component of this healing, for it to happen, you have to be in a safe place, free of judgment, where you don't feel self-isolated. Now, I've heard you mention that before. And like when we were talking, and in fact, somebody has mentioned hypnosis, and you and I were talking about the perspective of hypnosis. You were saying, actually, if everybody felt safe in the first place and that they didn't feel judged and they weren't self-isolated, they probably wouldn't get ill in the first place, because most of these traumas, the effect that they have, or one of the things that makes them create illness, my understanding from you is that people feel isolated and on their own.
No, we're talking cross purposes, right? So there are some conflicts which are caused by isolation, which is it affects the kidneys, and it causes us to retain fluid. And that's one reason why self-isolation is such a dangerous thing, because it's completely opposite to what nature wants us to do as pack animals. Right. So if there's some trouble, some unknown danger that's in the community, for example, to self-isolate is biologically wrong, and it has a biological consequence, which creates a symptom in the chest. Okay, if there's a territorial fear involved as well, you then end up with a chest condition similar to asthma, right? So that's one type of conflict, which is self-isolating. But what I mean is that when we suffer these shocks, which are called DHS, right? they're named after Dr. Hammer's son, Derek Hammer syndrome, because Dr. Hammer, he got his shock on the phone. He was at work, the phone rang, he got a message saying your son has been shot and he's critically ill. Now that just about floored him. And he had no one to support him there. He was on his own. It wasn't as if it was like, oh, the Scottish football team lost the World Cup and we're all in the crowd together in the pub going, oh my God, we're just disgusted with everything. I mean, that's like a group shock. That doesn't cause anything in anyone. But if you have a shock that you cannot disperse that energy of the shock with amongst your people, your pack, right? It goes into you. Let's say it's something highly personal. Let's just say, you know, your best friend's just found out that you're a cross-dresser and he's telling everyone down the pub, right? It's like, oh my God, you feel so embarrassed that it goes into you. That's a kind of extreme example. But let's say you think you've done something wrong, or you think you might have gone bankrupt, or you've had a big argument with your sister and there's no one else there to help you. So these are
bullying.
Bullying, absolutely. Bullying, completely so. So it's one of the criteria that makes a shock into a bioactive shock. The shock has to be deeply felt, it catches you completely off guard, and you suffer it with a sense of isolation. You know, you're not supported. Your framework of support is not with you, and it just hits you before you can share it. You know, so that's what isolating means. An self-isolating shock. And Dr. Hammer discovered that all these three criteria are present in all bioactive shocks, which he called DHSs, right? And so that's what I think that was your question, was what makes the isolation. I want to just clear that up.
I've got another observation actually. A lot of the people that are listening to the show are coming through Carl, and a lot of them are expats. And one thing that a lot of expats experience when they move to a new country is isolation, you know, because they're having to, you know, they kind of end their terms, you know, end their relationships, or their relationships change with their mother country. And then they're in a new stage, and also in a place of insecurity at times. But anyway, that's just an observation. So if you do feel isolated, maybe we could think about a way of creating some support, so you feel like there's some togetherness, which in fact is probably what Carl is doing actually with his morning show.
Isolation, we're pack animals, so isolation is not good for us. But the shocks which turn into a disease, they catch you on the wrong foot. You're not expecting this to happen. You know, you're having a great old day, chat. The great example is the woman she met her best friend. She was out walking with the child. Okay. She meets her best friend. She's having a good chat on the pavement with her best friend, right? The child sees a friend across the street, pulls its hand out of the mum, runs across the street and gets hit by a car. Now, you cannot be prepared for that shock, right? It's just completely took you on the wrong foot. Bang, right? Yeah. In that instant of a second, you could have a nest worry. That could instantly start a breast cancer growing in that woman. Yeah. So that it's like something that we are not expecting. It catches us on the wrong foot, as Dr. Hammer so aptly says, and we feel isolated, and it's deeply felt. It's not a trivial thing.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that clarification. If I can go to some of the questions. And some of these might have been answered. But Jeannie's saying, what about someone who's never felt safe in their whole life? How do you gain that perspective? I shared that because you were talking about like the safe place and feeling self-isolating. I mean, if somebody has never felt that, then if somebody's never felt that, are they at a bit of an advantage because they're not in that kind of... No,
there's no disadvantage. You know, the thing with German medicine, or German new medicine, is that if you know it, right, when your body tells you have suffered a shock, a DHS, you will know what to do. You see, you'll catch it quick, right? If your kid comes home with so-called measles, If you know German medicine, you will know instantly what that child has got and what's caused it and what to do about it.
Is that
you will not need to go to anyone else to say, have a vaccine or have not have a vaccine or use, bottled water or whatever. You will know. Look, this is the power of German new medicine, is that it puts the power back in our hands as people, as individuals, and we will understand our own body. So that if somebody came back with measles, they would suddenly know. And then the thing is, all these other discussions that are going on about whether the vaccine's good or not, or whether does it cause autism or not, and all such things, okay, they just fall away. You don't even need to be bothered with those discussions anymore, because you know that measles is the healing symptom of an isolation conflict, a separation conflict. Right?
Leaving the teachers, that's
or leaving mum. It usually happens when a kid goes to school first. It's basically the child's been broken away from it's usually his mum, the main caregiver, and it goes to school. Now that child will be in emotionally active, or I should say, will be biologically active with a DHS up until the time it gets used to being in school and forms a relationship in school, which then support it. Then the psyche gives up on it. It's no longer feels isolated or separated because, well, it's going to a place where it's full of its friends, new friends. So the separation from mum goes into healing. It's expressed through the skin, and you get a whole pile of spots appearing all of a sudden. I'll tell you exactly when the spots appear. The spots appear the very day after the psyche of that child gives up on that trauma. The very next day, it gets measles. So and measles in itself is, according to German new medicine, measles is a healing symptom of a conflict. And it's a separation type conflict where the child is basically gone to school for the first time, right? Or been away from the mum for the first time. That's the normal cause of it. I mean, it can be caused in anyone at any age. It's just as we get older, the thought of being separated from mum isn't so traumatic. We can survive on our own without mum. But when you're 4 years old or 3 years old, being without mum is a lot more biologically significant. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it could also explain why a lot of children get it at the same time, because they're all starting school at the same time, and presumably when one of the children, when they start to gel and relax, it's quite contagious. Like the relaxing is contagious. And it also goes to explain why, when it's such a contagious thing, that some children don't get it, because for some, it won't be.
It's all in the brain, and the proof is the brain scan, right? The fact is, and it's a fact that nobody can deny, apart from a lot of people deny that the scans are real, which is, it's a point of view that people are allowed to have if they so wish. But anybody who is prepared to believe the X-ray scan of the brain can see, with a bit of practice, can actually see the marks in the brain which trigger symptoms. So I talked, for example, earlier about a woman that might have breast cancer. Well, if her glandular breast cancer is in her left breast, there will be a mark in her right cerebellum. Okay. And it is 100% there in every woman.
And we can you've got a graphic to show how things are linked up, haven't you?
Yeah.
On.
Yeah, by all means, yeah.
I just wanted to say, Jeannie, so I was asking about safety, and then she's added, I do feel we can change our DNA. That's definitely a discussion to have. But and in fact, I was watching a video, or starting to watch a video about this morning. But I also have arthritis, and now wonder if this is why, for me, why is it happening for me? As I also carry the genetic marker. I mean, this whole study will put all of your beliefs it will jumble around, because I remember being told that I had a genetic marker for breast cancer because my nan and my mum had it, and they put my sister and I through blood tests to see if this was true. And their cancers were completely unrelated at different times in their life, but there's still this kind of idea that we have these genetic markers. And I'm guessing at some level there is suspicion that possibly what we're told about genetic markers and our understanding of them maybe isn't actually like maybe our belief of the world, and what, like a bit like, are we talking about are we Louis Pasteur or are we Béchamp? Like there's two different thoughts. And if you go down one route, all of a sudden that becomes your belief system. And then all of a sudden you might think, whoa, we've gone all this way down. Oh, how can we go back if that's not quite right? I don't know. But Jenny did say, I can say that when I dwell on it, I feel worse, which is interesting. So when she dwells on her symptoms, and maybe we can come back to this at the end. David Dawson is saying, for those who can put a finger or figure or have had several traumas, would hypnosis be a methodology for discovery? So like if you can't quite get to the trauma, is it useful to use hypnosis? Have you explored that?
Yeah, I have. I have done that. I'm trained in hypnosis, so I have used that, and I have used it to some success. Yeah, but the best marker, the best way of doing it, is to look at your symptoms, because your symptoms are the teller of your biological truth.
Yeah.
Right. And if you have if you can plot back when your symptoms started, and with a little bit of study to learn the basics of German new medicine, when you know it, you can put everything together, and you can work out when in life an issue will have started, or a trauma will have started your symptom. If it's a sort of more minor symptom, then the trauma may well be not consciously, will not be recognized many years later on. So that becomes more difficult. So always the best place to start is to just carefully draw a timeline. I do that with my clients. We draw a timeline. When did the symptoms start? When did they get worse? When did they get better? Did they stop for a while? Did they start up again? Is it exactly the same symptom that stopped and then started? Or is it, like, for example, if you had, say, Crohn's disease, and you had inflammatory patches in, say, the small intestine, and then it stopped for 5 years and it came back and it was in the large intestine, then it would indicate that it's not the same conflict. That's a different conflict you're looking for. And the first one healed. But people would normally think, oh, well, the Crohn's came back. It didn't come back because the symptom changed place. Symptoms can't do that unless the conflict, it changes brain relay, or area in the brain. So with this, German new medicine gives us this foundation of fact, which allows us to create, to think like Sherlock Holmes and get all your information together. We put together things like, when did the symptoms start? When did it stop? Am I left-handed or right-handed? Because that is very significant with symptoms and other such factors. We can put them together and we can work out within a short period of time when the trauma must have been and what kind of trauma our psyche experienced, which also gives an indication to what happened in life. Okay. So like the breast cancer woman, it's like a nest worry. She would have had a major worry or a major disagreement with somebody in her pack. Now it could be her child or her grandchild. You see, a grandmother could get breast cancer for a grandchild.
Yeah.
You see, if you, and the thing is, when you can plot it back and you can put it within a framework of German, the framework of understanding that it gives us, it then empowers you to start to put things right. And you will also know what to expect as healing symptoms, because sometimes the healing symptoms can be very dramatic. Yeah. So, and they in themselves become a trauma. If you don't know that this such and such a symptom is a healing symptom, you then get trauma from it. it can actually become a trauma, which then starts something else. So you can end up.
Yeah, getting a diagnosis is really terrifying at times, isn't it?
Yeah, but the thing is, German new medicine, it's like a roadmap and a compass. It doesn't give you the answers. You find your own answers, because everyone's going to different places on that roadmap, right? Everyone's got their own roadmap of life with their own problems. But German new medicine gives you a compass and a map. And then you got to sit there and get yourself to your destination.
I love that. Thank you, Robert. And I just want to put a shout out to Sarah Exton, who says, "Hi, Louise. I saw you on Carl's show this morning and subscribe because I love this kind of thing." And I hope you're finding it useful, because I really like the idea of creating a timeline for yourself where you notice. I was pondering over it a couple of days ago while I was washing up and thinking, there have been times when I've put on weight suddenly and then all of a sudden lost lots of weight, and what was going on, and also times when possibly I wasn't eliminating very well, and other times when it was really easy, and what was going on, like what were the lifestyle differences, because most of us go through to diet and think in terms of that first, rather than what's going on emotionally. And I really like Jeannie's comment, because, when she was talking about changing DNA or like the DNA markers, like you were talking about how a grandmother can, get breast cancer because of a reaction for the grandchild. I really think these connections, our genetics and our pack dynamics really play into that. I love that. Thanks so much. Thank you. David is asking for the link to the book that I was talking about, and I've made a note and I will put it in the show links. But I just want to go to Jean. So we've got a Jeannie and a Jean. Jean said, "I would probably be skeptical if I didn't know of several instances of spontaneous healing firsthand." And that's the thing, because we had quite a few listeners, and when you were talking about German measles, all of a sudden, like half of the people that were watching disappeared. They all just clicked off. And so that maybe triggered a load of people who were thinking, hang on, this is rubbish. Like, we know what German measles is and what causes it. And it's obviously a bacterial or, some kind of infection. But I mean, that is the thing. Like, our ideas on health and healing are so entrenched in what we've been taught. And it is quite a shocking thought that possibly it's much simpler or much clearer.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It is, and you're so right. We are so well. We're groomed. We are being groomed by anyone that makes money out of it. Makes money. It's called advertising. Yeah, it's not much difference. It's a kind of coercing or grooming or persuading to think in a certain direction, which may well suit certain people's objectives, right? But the thing is, with, for example, like German measles, they've never actually found any virus of any type.
It's interesting, because I saw something on social media where somebody had put forward a lot of money to, I think, was it the German government or some government in Europe, and said, I will give you this vast sum of money to the first person that can show me the virus that causes
That's right.
this.
That was a Dr. Stefan Lanke, and he himself was a very, very highly regarded virologist. And he realized that there is no proof of viruses. So he actually put around about 2012 or thereabouts, he put a wager up against anybody or any organization to prove the existence of the chickenpox virus.
That's right. Yeah,
that's right. And he still got his money. What, 6, 8 years? I don't know. 10 years later, he still got his money. And there's been a lot of attempts to get the money. So he's also quite recently done a really good video explaining how the process of verifying that viruses cause something is completely flawed, and that it doesn't actually prove a single thing at all, right? But that's a whole different thing. I understand that German new medicine is only for people who are able to at least entertain a new perspective long enough for them to be able to make an objective judgment of it. Most people have an objective, a judgment of it before they even know what G&M stands for, let alone anything about it. And especially if people go on, say, the internet and do a search for Dr. Hammer, right? Wikipedia, for example.
Oh yeah, I mean Wikipedia.
You're gonna get. You people got to realize that. Just ask yourself, how much money is involved in health globally? How much? You know, you think about it, it employs people from cleaners in hospitals right up to the people who own Pfizer's and Moderna, right? It's trillions of dollars a minute is being made on disease. Okay. So you've got to, you know, factor that into your reasoning too. That's my only advice. I can help people see some truth with that one.
Okay. So, sorry to sort of like hurry us on to a little bit more, because I'm really keen. Like, I set the title as Self-Healing Made Easy, like 3 steps. And I was thinking that steps were like having a symptom, maybe connecting to the trauma, and then, I mean, what would you see the steps as? I mean, is it 3? Is it 4?
Right. I'll tell you what, let's have a look at the first. I've sent you about 4 diagrams. Can you put the first diagram and I can talk through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeannie's asked a fantastic question, and I was wondering if this would come up. And we will come back to this, but I'm just putting it out there. I'm keeping an open mind and am curious. How does G&M explain the pandemic? I have definite thoughts about this. And we will come back to this at the end, for sure. Are you comfortable with that, Robert?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to talk about that, or do you want me to? What are you going to do?
I think we should actually push forwards with the slides that you've got, because we've scheduled.
I know
we scheduled an hour, and we've almost had the hour. So
I know. I don't believe where it goes.
But I think we're good for another half hour. Are you okay for another half hour?
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think this is important. So which image did you want first? The number 1, which
number 1, I think it was. So if you can get that up.
The one with the big arrow. Okay, 1 second.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic question that Jeannie has come up with.
Yeah.
Let's just bring on your arrow.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So if I can just read it out, and then make it bigger as well, Robert, because it says at the top, it says consciously felt emotion, which prompts us to take action and sort things out. And then at the bottom, it says changes within the body causing symptoms to help one process the emotional issue and resolve it from the perspective of the psyche. So these are 2 different forces going in a different way?
What that diagram is trying to convey is the shock, the star shape in the middle is like the trauma, the shock.
Yeah.
Okay. And the big arrow, which has got all the writing in it, that's really describing that shock. So that's basically saying some emotional shocks. Okay. If they're unresolved, they cause our bodies to adapt in an effort to overcome the related issue. That's related to the shock, right? So the shock causes our body to adapt to try and overcome the issue that's related to that shock. And it tries to help us in a practical biological way.
Yeah.
Now, this whole process is controlled by what's called the psyche. The psyche is the biological brain. It's on guard 24/7, and it's aware of all our senses. Even if we're asleep, it's still aware of what's going on, and it's processing life to keep us safe. Now, through the process of evolution, our psyche has learned to react in certain emergency situations with certain emergency survival processes.
Yeah.
So, for example, the woman whose child pulled free from a hand, ran across the road, and then the child got hit with a car. That woman suffered a trauma, which is like that star shape in the middle.
Yeah.
The instant of that trauma, she felt an emotion, which would have been terror or panic.
Yeah.
And in the body, instantly, right, this under the control of the psyche, instantly, her breast tissue would have started to multiply to create more breast tissue to help feed or to help nourish her stricken child.
And that is a biological response that all mammals have.
That's a biological response, and it's mediated by the psyche. And if one does a CT scan of the brain of that woman, they will see a little, very faint ring pattern in the exact relay in the brain, which controls the tissue of the breast, which produces milk. And it's 100% correlation. Every time it is correct, according to Dr. Hammer's research, and there are tens of thousands of cases in his research portfolio. So it's beyond doubt, in my opinion. So that's what that diagram basically says. When we suffer the conflict or the shock, it affects us emotionally and it affects us biologically.
Yeah. So the biological psyche symptoms are represented like the energy is going down, and then you've also got the consciously felt emotion
going up. And that's just my diet. That's just how I try to explain it diagrammatically. And the trick to healing is finding that shock moment, that explosion moment of emotional explosion, that emotional shock that hit us to the core. We were isolated, we were caught us on the wrong foot, right? Bang, that shock becomes active. And that's as if somebody's interested in using German new medicine to help heal themselves, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that trauma. And then, you know, there's ways I explained how I helped my sister. But anyway, right. So there's the trauma. The next slide will actually show what that trauma does in the brain.
Okay. I'm going to remove that and find the scan. Because that's the next picture, isn't it? Okay, so we're looking at a brain scan, and this is what Dr. Hammer would use.
Yes.
And is this what you're referring to? This circle, like this?
Yes.
Like,
that scan. I've copied that scan from learninggnm.com, because for me, there's about 3 major references which I have used to study this new understanding, and learninggnm.com is one of them. free-new-medicine.com is another one. Now
I'm just typing that in. Okay, go on.
Okay, so the arrows there are just put on the diagram to show where the subtle changes in the structure of the brain. Now that
I mean, I wouldn't know what I was looking at.
No. Anyway, if you're into studying CT scans of brains, you kind of would you'd get familiar with that, right? So that's looking at the brain, and those arrows are showing an area of the brain which controls controls a component of your coronary artery.
Okay.
So your coronary artery feeds blood to your heart. It also branches up and it feeds the carotid arteries and the aortic arch. So those tissues in the body are controlled by that part of the brain. And that unfortunate person that scan is of has suffered a territorial loss conflict. If they're right-handed. If they're left-handed, it's a sexual conflict. But that's a little more complex than I need to be, right? Basically, if that's a right-handed man, for example, that person has suffered a territorial loss conflict. And the body has reacted under the control of the psyche to widen the artery that feeds the heart with blood in order to supply the heart with significantly more blood, so that man can rage and fight and get his territory back. Because that's what happens in nature. If you look at nature, that's where you see the truth of it, the explanation of this. You know, a stag. I live up in the north of Scotland. We see stags. In fact, they're actually on the go just now. So the stags fight to get women. Now, if that stag loses, if that big stag has got a load of hinds or women deer, he loses them. He gets a young guy comes and pushes him out.
And then that's his life over, isn't it? You know,
that's his life. But biologically, biological, what nature's done is that stag can wait for a day or two until the arteries that supply his heart widen, and then he could come ramming in so hard with his antlers, and he could actually push the new stag out again, and he could regain his stag, his hinds, which means that his biology will go forward for another year, which is, in nature, that's hugely important. So in a man, that guy, he might have lost a really bad divorce case, right? And he felt all of his stuff's get taken away from him, or he might have lost his company, for example. So the significance of that is the same process will be happening in him as happens to all animals. He will develop angina, and he will start, his artery that supplies his heart will start to widen, same as it will in every other species. On resolution of that conflict, the body will then go through a natural process which has been done for millions of generations to get him back to normal. And part of that process is a heart attack. Now, if the stag has only been conflict active for a week before he gets his hinds back, then his heart attack, he will not even notice it happened, right? If he doesn't manage to get his hinds back, well, then the conflict never gets resolved. So the stag it just dwindles away. But if that stag, let's say, was conflict active for a year and then got his hinds back a year later, he would have a fatal heart attack after that, if it was a significant shock. And that's one of the beauties of Dr. Hammer's work. In his hands, because he was a doctor, and he knew an awful lot more than I certainly know. He could tell from these scans that sometimes basically it only refers to these shocks relating to the heart, and also the pancreas, with the sugar relays in the pancreas. But sometimes a shock is best not healed, because for example, I said that, like, so chickenpox was a sign of healing. Well, a heart attack is a sign of healing as well. So a heart attack tells somebody that they have resolved a territorial loss conflict, and their body is now going through the healing phase of it. And the heart attack is caused when the brain relay tries to rearrange itself back to normal again. It tries to squeeze out the fluid within itself. So the amount of information you can understand from a brain scan is phenomenal. You can know, well, for example, you can know by looking at that one that person has suffered a territorial loss conflict, and that they're not quite in healing yet, because it's still not so clearly defined. When it goes into healing, it changes and it swells up with fluid. Now, if that is seen by a doctor, or that could be diagnosed as brain tumor, and it would be removed. But in nature, it wouldn't be removed. What would happen is the stag would either get his hinds back or not. In mankind, the problem with mankind is that we just don't realize the connection between the loss of territory and the angina. So therefore, the angina goes on for too long. And then when the person then eventually resolves that conflict, there's too much work to do in the brain, and the brain actually causes the heart attack, and then the person dies because it's unnatural.
And that is one of the difficulties with us human beings, is our traumas go on for a really long time, because we're all experiencing territory conflicts pretty much all the time, in different ways, and there's not really an acceptable process to resolve it. We can't just like bash the nearest person that's taken it out.
No, it's true. And Dr. Hammer found time and time again, a practical resolution worked pretty much every time. And if people know, this is why one of the reasons why I hope to get across on this show with you is that we're going to start doing more presentations where we explain it a little bit more. At least I'm going to, whether it's here or whether it's on my own Zoom channel, it's still to be decided yet. But when you know this in advance, right, you instantly know what has caused your trauma. If I wake up tomorrow with angina, I will know instantly that yesterday it was because of such and such. So I will then go out and fix that such and such. Or if not, if I can't fix it, I will change my perspective on it, because I certainly don't want to have a heart attack because of it. You see? And that's the true beauty. That's the power of understanding. It's like if you've got a car, you're best to do maintenance on it before it breaks down, aren't you? It's kind of common sense. Well, with the body, right? As soon as the symptom comes up, you're best to know about that so that you can understand what needs to be fixed in your life. Because the sooner it's fixed, the easier it is to fix, and the less symptoms that you will develop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we okay? Just like looking in terms of time, are we okay to have a look at the temporal lobes image?
Yeah,
Robert?
just have a quick look. We'll just have a quick look. That's just for interest. The next one, yeah.
Because I mean, it does tie into what you're talking about here.
Yeah, totally does. Yeah.
Let me just bring.
I'm looking forward to telling people the back method, which I've basically kind of copied and adapted from another sort of colleague of mine.
Let's see if I can make this bigger. What I will do is take us out of the conversation so it gets. Yeah. Oh, hang on. Let me see if I can make that bigger.
It's quite good on my screen. It looks pretty good.
There we go.
All right, yeah.
That's better, isn't it?
Yeah. So you can see the picture above, the two little heads above, right? Well, that you can see the bits that are colored in there. They're kind of a purple and a green color, and then there's a little bit of gray in front. Well, that really represents those relays below it. So those, it's just a diagram, okay? It's for educational purposes only. Yeah. And that just shows us which tissues are controlled by those parts of the brain specifically. And I was talking just a minute ago about a coronary artery heart attack, which is the sort of halfway down on the side of the right. Yeah, right? But that's just for interest. It's just really to show people, like your cystitis is see right down. Yep. And there, the bottom one, your bladder, pelvic, urethra, that's the lining of the urinary system, basically. And when it goes into healing, you get cystitis. Yeah. So if you keep getting cystitis, there's something that needs to be resolved. You can start to work back, and you can you've got a compass and a map then, and you can work out what it is, and you can fix it, and then all happy days. That's what we're after, right? Yeah.
I mean, I've looked at all the big events, like where I've been in hospital with, also with pyelonephritis, which I've had twice, allegedly. And I've been on morphine and had all these scans and this, that, and the other. And really funny, when I was diagnosed with pyelonephritis and on morphine, they couldn't actually, like, they said you have the symptoms of it, but they couldn't confirm it. That was the really bizarre thing, was that they were giving me the diagnosis, very much like when I had glandular fever, back as a teenager.
Yeah.
The doctor said, oh yes, she's definitely got this virus. And I specifically remember, this is like 30 years ago, I specifically remember him saying, we can't test for the virus, but we know you have it. And I remember thinking, really, wow, that's really bizarre. And then being told it was a really highly contagious, and yet my family, none of them got it. So there's a few things that now I'm looking back at my own health and thinking, oh wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Not to you, because you must have people say that all the time, right?
All the time, yeah. But if you don't know anything else, we as a species, we always look for an explanation. And if you don't know this work, then you're going to choose. The virus hypothesis sounds convincing, but it still remains a hypothesis. 60, 80 years after it was invented. I know 70 or so, back in 1958 or so. Right, it's still unproven, and the reason why it's unproven is because it's just a misunderstanding of nature. But have you got the other slide there?
Yes, I do. Let me just share that. And then the last one is your, hang on, let me just find it.
I just never realized that we're 1.5 hours into this. No, 1.25 hours in. It's frightening how time flies.
Well, I mean, that's what happens, isn't it? It's a pretty interactive subject. So this is the slide you wanted me to share. So using the back method.
Yeah, and I've really taken this from Dr. Alvin de Leon, who's a guy who's he's one of the leading lights in helping people discover germ and new medicine.
This is actually a 4-step process, not a 3-step. That's my mistake.
I suppose so. The last one is basically just keep on doing it, right, till you're successful. But so BAC stands for break away from the disease idea, because it's an idea, right? Because symptoms are there doesn't mean to say it's a disease. It's a disease. It might, well, as I've said, there's a reason, a biological reason. So break away from the disease idea and embrace that your body, no matter what you've got, your body is trying to help you with a life issue, real or perceived. I must add that onto there, because sometimes I've worked with people who have been on pretty hard drugs, and they've had experiences which might not have been real, but they felt real to them and had an effect on them. Okay. So break away from the disease idea and embrace that your body is, no matter what symptom you have, your body's trying to help you in some ways. Your body's not trying to kill you. It's trying to keep you alive. The next thing I sort of help people do is become aware of the unexpected stress event which started the issue symptom. So the issue and the symptom. So I say that because remember my topic with my sister, I really was looking for the thing that started her symptoms, and it also started an issue in her life which was driving those symptoms. Okay. So become aware of the unexpected stress event which started the issue and the symptom.
Yeah.
When you can connect, when you have that aha moment, right, you can start to change your relationship with that trauma.
Yeah.
And as I've said, sometimes just the knowing, just coming together with that knowing can be enough to release the psyche, to release it back into healing. But sometimes it takes work. Sometimes you have to have therapy, to get our heads around different arguments. That issue, that big fallout that's so affected, so made you so angry, say 5 years ago, you can talk yourself out of it. And when you do talk yourself out of it genuinely, when you happen to know that it's causing your stomach ulcer, you can change your perspective, and that breaks the psyche away from being conflict active into healing, so the body can finally heal.
And that corresponds with what Jean was saying. I would probably be skeptical of GNM if I didn't know of several instances of spontaneous healing firsthand.
Yeah, it's so true. And even you go back to the Bible and the story of Jesus and such, healing people. You can now see how that could happen as well on a biological level. I mean, hugely spiritual, obviously, but people can heal. When we relieve, obviously somebody, when Jesus was involved, people would have been able to give up their sins, if you like, and be pardoned and be accepted, and that in itself, could be an explanation for that. So it's break away from the idea of disease, become aware of what's caused your symptom, then change your perspective within that thing that's caused your symptom, and K is basically be persistent, because it's not easy. Sometimes we get the wrong thing, or we can't embrace the trauma intimately enough to release the energy from that trauma. So the trauma still remains active. So my experience and advice is to not give up, is to keep. And if you're not able to be successful, seek help from somebody who might be able to help you get to your destination, right? Which at the end of the day, if you get there safely, that's all we need, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I love that. And so keep applying yourself to the process until you're successful. So break away from that's a really big key. Like, break away from the idea that disease is normal, and that you can only really recover by taking a pill, or you know,
I mean, you've got to. That's a big ask, right? You've got to break away from, oh, it's genetic, or I've inherited it, because you know, my sister had both of these things hanging on, which was proving the fact that she should expect to have rheumatoid arthritis. For good heaven's sake, your mother had it, and it's all in your family, and you've got the gene. So what else can you expect? And she had rheumatoid arthritis for a long time, until one conversation, and then it just all disappeared, and so did all the DNA. So my advice about that is that again, the genetics is. It's not been proven that you catch or you inherit these tendencies, because Dr. Hammer's proven that you cannot actually get them until you have the shock, which affects the brain and can be photographed, objectively seen, you know?
Also, I mean, the branch of science that talks about epigenetics talks that you can express genes or turn them off.
Well, there you go. That's
and so it's saying that, you know, like, your lifestyle can turn certain tendencies on or deregulate those, and presumably by lifestyle that also includes your belief system. The funny thing is, and I've only just realized this now, I was part of a study at Wareham Hospital back in I'm guessing back in the early 2000s now, you know, a long time ago. And during that time, I was told that this was, you know, I would be probably my illness would progress, and one day I'd be in a wheelchair, and probably I'd be bedbound, and this, that, and the other, and I wouldn't be able to have children, and all these beliefs. And I was told that by a load of people in white coats who couldn't help me with the symptoms that I'd been experiencing, which came on after I got the shock of being told that I had glandular fever. The really strange thing is, I remember very vividly being told I'd be ill for, you know, this would be forever. And I remember going into this this group that I was part of the study with, and seeing people being like, there were a couple of girls on stretchers, other people on wheelchairs, people with walking sticks. And I just said to myself, there is no way this is my future. And it wasn't. I mean, other steps happened, but that was when I stopped believing that my body was working against me. It's fascinating. Now, I'm very aware that this is quite an intriguing subject for a lot of people. I want to say David Dawson saying thank you, Louise and Robert. So I guess he's realizing that we're coming close to wrapping up. And I did say I'd save Jeannie's question to the end, and she's actually added a couple of extra bits in. So I'm going to leave the big one right till the end. But I shared the learninggnm.com, and Jeannie just said, I found the Learning GNM page earlier, but there seemed to be only one page. So I'm just going to quickly share it, because I've got it on my screen.
It's a very big website. There's many pages in it, and there's a phenomenal amount of information on it.
So this. Can you see? Oh, hang on. I don't know if I've added that in. Hang on. Let's add it in. So this is it. But I just need to go back a step, because I already pressed enter. When you go to it, you have an enter here button, and maybe, I don't know if you looked at it on a phone, but you enter, and then there's a whole bunch of
if for example, if you go to biological programs along the top there, click on that, you go down there, and you click on any of those, you get quite a detailed description, along with CT scans, which you know are part of this science. So it's a really fabulous website to become familiar with. Very, very much so.
Yeah, like I've just clicked on female breast, and literally for each one of the things, it shows you what's going on, what part of the brain is affected, and like you say,
yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's the process of it. Yeah.
And that's pretty much for pretty much all the different parts of the body that you can think of. I've looked up some very random ones as well. So that's I just wanted to share that. That's what I've actually got on my homepage on my phone, which I find very useful.
I just want to sort of give a little plug to what I'm hoping to do, and that is that if anybody would like to know more about German new medicine and just becoming a bit more familiar with it and being able to use it, to be able to understand it to the point where they can be guided by it. I'm going to be doing a monthly presentation, either on Zoom or with yourself, or wherever it's going to be. But where I'm going to do a presentation where we just talk about the 5 biological laws, which is the backbone of it. There's 5 laws which describe every disease that is known so far, and how we apply that laws to help us get ourselves well again. So they're going to be interactive, like Zoom sessions, where I do a little bit of a display, a few diagrams, and then we just have an hour or an hour and a half discussing a particular topic that night, or things in general, depending on what people want. So I'd just like to put that out. If anybody is interested, please send me an email. I think I've got a website, which is robert-jardine.com. You can contact me through that, or you'll hear again, I dare say you'll be able to tell people about that as well, Louisa.
Yes, I will share that.
Yeah.
For sure.
So that's in the near future. That hopefully that I'm going to be setting that up over the next month, and then it'll start happening regular. So it's another thing there to help people understand their own health.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really fantastic idea. Jeannie's saying, is this trauma then the thing that turns the genes on and off? Interesting thought. I don't know. It could really fit in with epigenetics.
No, it's got nothing to do. I don't think it's got anything to do with genes. Genes are a scientific diversion at the moment.
Okay.
It's not genes. It's the brain. The psyche controls the brain, and the brain controls the tissue. So it's the tissue. Right, so the breast tissue, or the digestive tissue, or the skin tissue, different parts of the brain, and it's reacting in a way that evolution has taught our bodies to react. Because at some point during our evolutionary journey, that type of response would have helped us in some way. We're talking maybe 10 million years ago, right? And as I've said, like the stag who loses, it's the best thing that could happen, because he needs that extra heart pumping power to win his fight, to get his stag, his women back, if you like. It's a biological need to it, and it's the same for all diseases, from everything from heart attacks to Alzheimer's disease. They are all mediated through the brain for a biological reason, is what the conclusions that he came to. And all I can say is that my experience of it is that it is 100% correct in every case.
Yeah. I've just been given a not a timeout, but
I know,
because I'm looking after the kids on my own, and one of them wants some milk, so I am going to have to wrap this up. Jeannie has thanked us. And says, thanks so much for the information and for going over time for questions. Have a great day. And it was Jeannie that we were going to answer that question for. So I'm not entirely sure that she wants to know the answer today, but I'm really happy with that question, which was, how does GNM explain the pandemic? And maybe that is something that we can answer for people if they contact us. because I don't know if we've got time to actually go through the whole thing right now in my 5 minutes that I've got to get back. And I would
I can just, my own personal opinion based on everything that I know is that the virus can affect anybody who believes in it.
That's a very simple model. I love that. That does work. Yeah, because if you believe in something, it does become it often becomes a reality. Yeah. I've been watching. She's saying, "No, I'm good. You go and enjoy your day." That's bless you. Thank you so much. And I've been following the freedom of information requests that different people have been doing to all of their countries' governments and health authorities, asking for evidence of the full string DNA of the virus, and not a single country has come back with any actual.
The only way I can reconcile it, because I've lost so many friends on Facebook and had so many crazy discussions, right? The only way I can say is, look, time will be the teller of the truth. And I just, perhaps it's a way that nature thins out, if anybody can't, there's going to come a time, right, when it's our responsibility to actually see through what's been told to us, to actually see some truth. Because I think I would be much more frightened of the vaccine than the virus. Like, not that viruses exist, but the vaccine certainly exists, and the symptoms that it causes seems to very much exist also. So that would be my biggest worry at the moment.
I think there's a lot of research, and like we said right at the start, we said that this isn't for us to diagnose anyone. We're not doctors. No. We're just like messengers with a different model. It is for your information. We advise everyone to do their own research and also come to their own conclusions. I love what Jean has put right at the end. My friend who healed herself 30 years ago, melanoma, fascinating story, calls it medical hexing. Maybe it's because we've been talking about medical healing, but medical hexing. I love that.
I completely agree.
So it's a controversial subject. And like you say, it's one that time will tell. From my own perspective, I like to think that people have options and at least know that there might be another avenue to research. Whatever is going on, I research everything. I don't really take much as read. And then when I do realize I've taken something on board as the truth, I then later on think, oh, hang on a second. Is that really what we, I've been in this last couple of years in particular, but really over the last 10 years, but it's really kind of come into itself in the last 2-3 years, is I'm realizing that a lot of the models that I've assumed as being exactly as they are, on further inquiry, it doesn't stand up. And so that's the reason why I have these conversations with all my interesting guests, of which you are one of them.
We've all heard of the Great Awakening, haven't we?
Yeah.
Well, I believe, right, that Dr. Hammer's research and his 5 biological laws is the Great Awakening, in as much as, right, because if everybody knew it, this pandemic could not have happened. Just the knowing of it, right? And mankind would have known what we're living in. We're living in our own bodies. We're living in us. Now, we don't know us. We still wonder why we catch the flu, or why we catch athlete's foot, or why we catch bowel cancer. Well, we don't even know what we're living in, right? Imagine. Whereas German new medicine tells us what we're living in. It's the thing that supports our soul. It's our soul's journey. And it's now time for the world for the soul, for the conscious mind to realize what we're in, so that we can live according to its needs.
Wow. That, I think, is a stunning end to what an interactive session. I can't thank you enough, Robert, for once again giving your time to share your experiences, the stories, or all of the things that have connected the dots for you. And I really appreciate the fact that, even though it has been ridiculed or could be ridiculed, you know, by mass media and this, that, and the other, that you are committed to sharing what you've experienced, because it does contradict some of the things that possibly we've heard. So thank you so much. Thank you. And if people want to reach you, they can reach you at your website, www.robert-jardine.com. So thank you to everybody that has joined us today. I really appreciate it. If you found it interesting, please feel free to share it. And hopefully we'll connect another time in the near future. But from Robert and I'd like to say goodbye.
Goodbye. Lovely speaking to everyone.
Take care. Bye for now.
Take care.